If your organization is ready to enhance cyber resilience, we have important insights for you. The Level Blue Futures Report 2024 sheds light on how rapid computing changes affect IT visibility. Our research reveals that while IT leaders see positive outcomes, 85% acknowledge increased risk. In this report, we identify the barriers to cyber resilience, the challenges impacting cybersecurity, and the business context that reveal operational issues. You'll also discover what's on the horizon and 5 essential steps for prioritizing cyber resilience. Get your complimentary copy of this crucial research today by visiting securityweekly.com/Level Blue. Cybersecurity simplified. ThreatLocker implements a least privileged approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits, and ensures 24/7, 365 protection for your organization. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. Now for this week's leadership and communications articles. You can check out securityweekly.com/BSW 369 if you want to check out the links for the stories that we're going to talk about today. All right, Jason. Some interesting stuff today. I think we all followed that Joe Sullivan case very closely. Some
absolutely.
probably more closely than most. But yeah, and we're going to get to this later. But being a CISO, particularly for a public company, can be scary these days.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we're seeing so many folks actually leave the CISO roles, right? We've talked about it on the show with Matt and with Ben that there's so many CISOs going over to more of the consultative side of the aisle, where they're becoming virtual CISOs, right? And they're really leaving the one organization type role, that C-level executive role, and really going out there and being consultants. And I think it has to do with all the pressures that are happening right now on CISOs. There's no clear, definitive responsibility, accountability that you can lean on, much like, let's call it financial crimes, right? We know if within an organization there's any type of insider trading or financial crimes, the CEO can be liable. The CFO is liable, right? If the CEO had knowledge of criminal activity, if they failed to take the reasonable steps to prevent it, even if it was the CFO doing it, or they were involved in some level of decision-making that led to it, they're responsible. And they're responsible from a criminal perspective, a civil perspective, regulatory. They could go to prison. I mean, I've even seen professional penalties where they can be barred from holding executive positions, or restricted, or have oversight on them if they do hold, any type of role that would have financial responsibility. So we don't have that in the cybersecurity world. And I'm going to say yet, because I'm hoping that we get there.
Yeah. It's a big yet. Yeah. And it's, so we do have, there are some precedents. Joe Sullivan, I maybe some of what I'm thinking of as precedents weren't necessarily cybersecurity related, though. They were security people. There was a case a few years back where a CISO was egregiously taking kickbacks for bringing on products, and he got prosecuted in Georgia, I believe it was. Okay. And that was kind of an open shut case, but yeah. So I also kind of call out the CEO of Drizzly, which I always got the impression that he kind of took the main hit for this, because I never found a CISO that worked for Drizzly. So this was a company that did alcohol delivery that was acquired by Uber right around the time that all this was going on, and the FTC enforced that the CEO has to do additional things no other CEO has to do regarding security for pretty much the rest of his career. They said 20 years, but at his age, it's going to be the rest of his career, regardless of who he works for. So I thought that was, I don't know if maybe Joe's not aware of that, or.
But you made an interesting point, Adrian. They didn't have a CISO. So who was the next in line to be a scapegoat? Maybe it was the CEO. Maybe the CEO was the one who managed the third parties that they brought in. If they had third parties running cybersecurity, maybe they reported into the CEO. Maybe he made decisions on certain risks that they wanted to either ignore or not remediate or not invest in. The devil's in the details around that. But one of the most important things I think you said was they didn't have a CISO. And so many times the CISO is the scapegoat when things like this happens. It's someone to point to.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me, particularly if it's a breach or something like that. I mean, the Joe Sullivan case has a lot more nuance than a typical, company has a breach or whatever. But if we look at other industries, it's not like we've driven fraud to zero. So I don't know why we would expect a CISO to be able to prevent all bad things from happening, all incidents from happening. Like it's not a realistic expectation. And there are other industries we can look at, that have been professionalized and shrink when you're in loss prevention. That's just something you seek to minimize. Yeah. And I think cybersecurity, incidents and breaches are also in that category where there's just so much complexity, so many ways in, that you seek to minimize. You don't seek to prevent outright.
Right. And we forget that the majority, I'm not going to say all, but so many of these incidents, we're dealing with sophisticated criminals. We're victims of crimes, right? In some of these instances, right? And we forget about that. And outside of folks being just egregiously negligent, I like to have that factor of most people want to secure their organization. If you're a CISO, right? Most CISOs are in it for the right thing, and they want to make sure they're securing the best they can with the budget they have, with the amount of authority they're allotted in their position, and we forget we're dealing with criminals.
And that kind of takes me into the second article here. CISOs concerned over growing demands of role, where if you look at some of these items that occur during breaches, like a basic password, no MFA, a lot of them do look egregiously negligent when you call them out by themselves. But when you look at everything that today's CISO is responsible for, like I know CISOs who are now getting fraud, they now have to deal with that. They have to deal with privacy. Now with AI, they have to make sure that the LLM baked into the support chat bot won't tell somebody how to make napalm, so adversarial prompting and AI red teaming is now it's all additional. Nothing goes away when the new stuff gets added on.
No, absolutely.
A lot of organizations who went to the cloud kept a data center, so it wasn't like the cloud replaced the data center. You still got both. It's given the breadth of stuff that CISOs have to worry about and they have to tackle. Some of these failures are going to look egregiously negligent if you're just looking at that small piece.
Exactly it. And like you mentioned, the responsibilities and accountabilities are just piling on at this point for CISOs, right? We talked earlier about third-party vendor risk management in the previous segment. Guess who's that's falling on? The majority of it's falling on the security organization, right? Or the risk management organization, which a lot of times either is, some level of a dotted line connection collaboration with the security team, because we're going to be out there testing all of their security controls in that third party risk management, right? So, so many pressures are coming down from the regulatory side, the responsibilities internally, legal side of the aisle. And the survey that you're talking about here was 5,000 IT security leaders, right? I mean, that's a decent clip of folks who came back and said,
it is.
You want to know what? I have a very high apprehension right now with being able to keep up with everything that's going on between the regulation and the responsibility. And 79% of them said it's not even attainable. It's not even a reality that we're going to be able to keep up with this stuff. If we continue to manage our security teams with the budgets we have and the amount of people we have, we're just, we're swimming against the tide.
Yeah. So this article does bring up breaking up the role, which I think is something you guys have chatted about on here as well. And I think there are some kind of clear lines where you could break that up, or, is it breaking up the CISO role or just more columns. Now you have BSOs and more specialized security leaders underneath the CISO, and then the CISO role becomes less technical, right? And
it
more
becomes
about
more of that risk manager, right? More of the chief risk officer type role. Yeah, I mean, I guess the devil's in the details. I mean, much like cybersecurity teams, if you were to do it, every organization's probably going to try their own little way to break it up. My concern, because there's always those things where you make a decision and it's the blessing and the curse that comes with it, right? And in the curse that I see that could come with this is, what does that do to the conversation around, we want a seat at the table? Because the CEO is not going to open up multiple seats. That's not going to happen. They're trying to minimize the amount of seats that they have at the table. Yeah. They want to lessen the amount of seats that report up to them. So all that does is complicate that conversation of being able to influence up to the CEO level. If you start splitting these roles out and you don't have a centralized accountability there, we're going to lose the seat at the table. That's going to disappear, because there's no way the CEO is going to say, we're having a hard enough time getting one seat at the table. Never mind trying to get multiple.
And Ben, I've been reading that book since Ben Carr recommended it to me, called A Seat at the Table. And it's a really enjoyable book. And it's specifically about the CIO, about that role. But I feel like a lot of it really relates over to the CISO role as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So, the next article here, more tech chiefs have success measured by profitability and cost management. That seems kind of like a duh moment, but I'm not sure that we can really map that to security, but I imagine you probably have an opinion on that.
Yeah, no, I do.
Perverse incentives is the main thing I would be worried about here.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. I mean, again, there's nuance to all this, and it's all about the how incentives are out there and the managing and balance of it. For someone like a CISO or a risk officer, I don't think the entirety of it can be based on profitability. There needs to be obviously some metrics in there about moving the needle on risk mitigation.
Let's just get rid of our whole security program.
It makes no sense, right? So, but I do think there's nuance to that as well, because we as security leaders want to show we're helping move the needle for the business. I gave the example earlier about how, our team was able to sit back and say, here's how much revenue we influence on a quarterly basis by helping you close opportunities, because
14 million. I remember the number.
Right. So one of the major hurdles to doing business with us is we need to be successful in our vendor risk management. We need to show our clients that we have our best foot forward. We have the controls in place that aren't going to put them at risk. And if my team can help you close that deal and get through that hurdle, guess what? You couldn't have done it without us, because if that didn't exist, that client would have said, sorry, goodbye, I'm going somewhere else. So we were able to help move the needle on revenue generation and close deals. I wanted to tabulate that. I wanted to be able to show how much. So we put, process in place where we could track it. And that's what we would show the CEO and the CFO and the board. Every quarter, the security team is influencing 14 million. It's pretty amazing, right? When you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so many of these, really depends on the CISO role is so different, and security programs, depending on the type of business, that it's almost difficult to talk about some of these things, because in my mind I'm thinking, oh yeah, completely different in a bank than from a tech startup, to a services company, to a retail or product company.
But that's the benefit of, I said it earlier in the other session, was go learn the business, because once you learn the business, you can start finding those little nuanced places where you can say, ooh, I could help this team maybe drive revenue or become more operational efficient, or you can find these little pockets of areas that you can start to influence. And then you start thinking about, all right, how can I take that and roll that up to the company goals, right? And how are we helping move the needle for the company goals? It may not necessarily be revenue generation. It may be other things that you can tie to, that you can report out on and say, I'm helping move the needle on these 3 of our 5 corporate goals. And here's how I'm doing it.
Yeah. So, Jason, how are you doing?
How am I doing?
Is your career heading in the right direction?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I kind of like this article a little bit, right? Because the article, sat back, it made you step back as a leader and say, every once in a while, should I be evaluating where I'm at in my career and where I'm at with the business I work for and reevaluate my values? It's kind of like a pause, do a little introspection, line it up and make sure you're still on a good path. And then you move forward or you make the changes you need to make, right? And we get so bogged down in the day-to-day, right? To keep the lights on, to keep things moving, that we do this in business as well. You forget about the strategy. You forget about picking your head up and looking, right? And looking around because you get so caught up in the whirlwind. Well, you can do that for yourself too, right? You can take a step back, peek above everything and say, hey, am I really on the right path here? Let me do a little bit of introspection for myself. And I loved how it basically says, listen, ask yourself the right questions. Are you happy where you're at? Are you happy with your company? Are you happy with your path? Then look back and say, all right, I'm going to reassess this. Are my values the same as what they've always been? How are things aligning with my values? Does, the job that I'm in align with my values? Does the company align with my values? Then I love how they called it the detox, right? where you can sit back and say, what can I take out of my life? What can I be adding into my life? And what's working right now so I can make those really impactful adjustments for my career? I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the conversations I have with mentees, with folks who are just starting to get into security, because the question is, like, where would you thrive? Where would you be happy? There's so many options, so many paths that you can take, but you can shift those paths mid-career, right? Like I thought I was on a CISO path, and then I found out that I could write about the industry for a living. And I could just sit there and think about big problems and so I went to work at 451 Research, and that was a complete right turn in my career that I didn't expect. I still went out, started my own consulting firm, got back kind of on the practitioner side, then got sucked into the vendor side, and I was product marketing and head of product in one role. And, so I've bounced around all over the place. But that has helped me really kind of understand what works for me, what I'm looking for out of a role. And I don't know. I don't know if I could go back, lead people, manage teams, be a CISO, particularly with what we're talking about already.
Right.
The kind of almost chilling effect that a lot is having on the role now. But yeah, these are, I think a lot of people think they're kind of locked into a path, and you're really not, and asking these questions, I think will help people. And the detox piece is my favorite bit, because in a lot of cases, when I talk to people who are frustrated about work, like they feel like, oh, well, I need to put in 5 years at this place, and it's a really toxic environment. They can have no impact, terrible security culture. There's no sense of accomplishment that they're getting from their work. I'm like, no, it's time to pull that ripcord and go.
Exactly. It's it's the fail fast mentality, right? I mean, go in there, and if things aren't working and they're going sideways, all it's going to do is create more angst, more stress, and your work-life balance is going to be horrible, because at the end of it, it's going to start bleeding into your personal life, and that sucks, right? So you don't ever want to do that. But yeah, ask those questions. And if the path you're at right now, or the company you're at right now is toxic and it's not adding value, you know what? Fail fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like people need permission, right? So I think talking to people along with this article, it's telling you to ask yourself the right questions, but also have these conversations around these topics, around these questions with other people.
Absolutely.
Particularly other people who have moved around. Maybe you're considering making a move to a different type of role or something like that. I'm always excited when I see somebody move into a completely different role, sometimes outside of security. And talking to them about why they made that choice and what it's like, what's it like outside?
That's great. But yeah, to your point, spread the wealth, right? Help other people.
Yeah. So, coming back to leadership, I'm going to let you run most of this because you've been in this position more than I have. But yeah, it's an interesting, it is a listicle, but that's kind of how I think. That's how I
Yep.
consume information. And I like how this is broken down.
Yeah, I do too. Being a transformational leader, it's really just it's a philosophy, right? It's taking a step back, saying where I want to be a leader that inspires folks, who takes their teams and uplifts them to make them better than they've ever been. I want to leave them better than I found them when they came on board with me. I want them to be able to achieve all of the things they're looking to do, if not beyond that, and help them find the things that could be their future, right? So it's not just transforming your department and the services that you provide in your department. It's transforming your people, and it's making your people the best they can possibly be, right? So you want to inspire them, you want to build trust with them, you want to make sure that you're motivating them and influencing them, and really just being that strong, trustworthy, guiding leader with, and I talk about service-oriented leadership all the time too, serving your staff and helping them become better people, better professionally, even in their personal lives, help them be better, right? If you can influence them in some good practices. So that's really the mindset around a transformational leader. Some of the things that transformational leaders have to do is they have to make sure they're very strategic. They're always thinking 5 moves ahead, right? They have to be. They have to have an intense amount of empathy. They need to be able to put themselves in the shoes of the folks that they're working with, and really be able to feel what they're feeling, and have that really high emotional intelligence, right? And the other side is, they have to be able to adapt, because things change, right? Your staff could be having personal issues, home life issues, things like that, and you need to be able to adapt around that. And like in most really, really strong leaders, you have to be inspirational. You have to have some level of charisma, because you need to inspire people, right? You need to be able to inspire people. And at the same time, you have to be that leader who leads by example, because at the end of the day, you will not be building trust if you're not leading by example. Walk the walk, don't talk the talk.
Something that occurs to me reading through all these points they have here is in all the leadership roles I've been in, I've not been a dedicated manager, right? I've had 2 full-time jobs and managing some people, right? I'm reading some of these thinking like, I would have loved to do that, but with what time, right. So, I wonder if that's something that people should push back more on. Like, okay, if you want me to lead a team of 10 or 12 people, I can't be doing all this other stuff.
And that's it, right? When you're a transformational leader, it comes with costs, right? There are costs that are aligned to this, and it's tiring to always be on. It can be exhausting to always be on, because you have to have that inspiration and that charisma all the time. You're living it all day, every day as a transformational leader. That comes at a cost. To be able to keep those high levels of empathy and energy and commitment to your folks, that comes at a cost, right? So I always say you have to be taking care of yourself in order to be taking care of others. So if you're all in and you want to really be that transformational leader, don't allow yourself to neglect yourself.
Yeah, put your own mask on first, as they say.
Exactly. That's right. When you're on the plane, right? Put your own mask on first so you can help others. 100%. You have to. Otherwise, you'll burn out, and then you're helping no one.
Yeah. And in this last one, this pay for performance, this is new to me. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but pay for performance. I guess. I think I've been one place that had performance related bonuses. In my entire career.
At the end of it, I guess it's similar to a sales role where you're getting comped on your sales, right? And you're getting, if you're successful in sales, obviously your compensation is based on that, right? So how much you sell, that's your performance. Now bring that over into more of the operational side. It can get extremely complicated. So what I'll say is, unless you really take the time to design this for the folks who are more on that operational side and not in sales, where, you know, they're driving revenue and getting a commission out of it, you really, really have to think about how you're going to institute this. Because if the employees don't understand the makeup of their compensation, that starts to erode trust. If they can't measure where they're going to be when that compensation is supposed to hit, or be able to proactively measure whether or not they're going to get the compensation, you're going to lose trust for that model. You know, you need to make sure that all of your data and the KPIs and the information you're providing on where they're at in attaining those goals is accurate, because if it's not accurate, they won't trust it. They won't trust the data. If the data is not good and you're not giving good feedback, they're not going to trust the system. It needs to become a very trustworthy, a very structured and tight program if you're going to do that. And it takes time to build that. So this isn't one of those things where you can knee-jerk react and just say, I want to pay for performance plan. Go build one quick for me, would you? As a CEO or as a CFO. No, you really have to think through how you design this, how you build it, pick the right metrics, make sure they're achievable, make sure that you can report out on them, make sure that you can have good data around it, because the second you get some gray area around this, it will die on the vine, or it'll become a cultural problem, right? It'll erode the culture of the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, you know, I remember people telling me that Microsoft had some kind of system that I don't think it was necessarily pay for performance, but everyone got reviewed and rated. And the way the system was designed, even if everybody on the team was amazing, somebody had to be in that bottom bracket. Like it forced somebody to be bad, right?
They'll
you know,
always be that bottom 10%,
needs improvement,
right? No matter what.
Yeah, and your performance could be,
I've seen that in sales organizations, right? So that's kind of something that they probably took from a chief revenue officer who instituted that, where, you know, I've seen some organizations who every year, the bottom 10% of the sales executives, they get let go no matter what. If you're in the bottom 10, likely you're going to get let go. And I've seen that as part of sales, which is brutal. I mean, think about that as a culture, man. If I have a bad year this year, I'm gone.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked for a bunch of startups, so I know. Yeah. And it's, you know, oftentimes the people letting go, like it's not their fault. You know, the company is not hitting, you know, like maybe you picked the wrong category, you know, maybe the ideal customer profile is wrong. You're selling to the wrong person in the organization. Or the wrong organizations, you know, like working for a startup, there's so many factors, and almost always like the relief valve is firing some people, right? And bringing some new people in, like that provides this feeling of, okay, things are moving, things are changing. This is good. But it's you know, it can be a bad signal.
Right. I say this all the time with comp plans, right? I equate it to sports. You need to know the rules of the game. You need to know how to keep score, and you need to know you need to know when you're winning or you're not winning. Right. So it's very important to know I'm playing by the rules. I'm playing the game well. You know, I know what my score is. Am I aligned to where my score should be? Am I going to win the game? How do I win the game?
Yeah. And it can't be, you know, breaches avoided, right? Like that can't be the metric.
Right. It has to be achievable, attainable, measurable.
Yeah. Be careful with those goals. Absolutely. Yep. All right, Jason, this has been great. Thanks so much for joining me today, making my job easy, standing in for Matt today. And
it was great to have you, my friend.
Can't wait to do it again.
Absolutely.
All right. And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Business Security Weekly. Matt should be back next week.